I'm gonna be frank about how Steven Spielberg subversively programmed the millennial generation as children to see the biblical God as a delusional old bloke who was never in control of his creation, and that the natural order, raw, chaotic, Darwinian nature, is the only real authority in life. Now, before you click away thinking this is some tinfoil hat conspiracy rubbish, stick with me, because what I'm about to lay out isn't just film analysis. It's theological warfare dressed up in Stan Winston animatronics and John Williams' triumphant brass sections. This was a sophisticated piece of cultural programming aimed squarely at millennial children with their boomer parents in tow, and a few older Gen X teens for good measure, designed to fundamentally reshape how an entire generation views God, creation, and authority itself. And I'm not just talking about the obvious stuff here. Yeah, sure, there's the whole Darwinian naturalism angle, and we'll get to that because the Darwin family were generational Freemasons. But what we're really dealing with here is a Gnostic reframing of the entire biblical narrative, dressed up in CGI dinosaurs and Jeff Goldblum's bare chest. Come on, mate, grab a drink and settle in, because we're about to decode how Steve systematically took the Garden of Eden story, flipped it completely on its head, and convinced a generation of kids that God is actually the villain, Satan is the hero, and life finds a way is basically the new gospel. First, let's talk about who this film was targeting, because Steve knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't just entertainment, this was demographic warfare. You've got your boomer parents, the ones who were already halfway out the door of Christianity by 1993, right? They'd done their whole question authority thing in the 60s, pursued careers over families, got divorced at record rates, and now they're taking their millennial kids to the cinema to watch. What exactly? A fun dinosaur movie. Nah, mate, they're watching a carefully constructed narrative that validates every choice they've made while programming their children to continue that trajectory. And for the older Gen X teens who went, same deal, different entry point. They were already dealing with broken homes and absent fathers, so this film spoke to them too. The genius here is that Steve gives you two sets of protagonists to identify with, the boomer adults, Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler, and the millennial children, Tim and Lex Murphy. Everyone gets a character to project onto. Everyone gets programmed. So let's start with Alan and Ellie. Typical childless boomers, yeah. Career over family, unmarried but sexually active, very progressive for the early 90s, very this is normal now messaging. Alan literally opens the film terrifying a child about how velociraptors would disembowel him. Charming bloke, really paternal energy there. Ellie's the empowered woman archetype, but together they represent this post-Christian, post-family boomer mindset that's become default by the 90s. They're literally paleontologists, right? They dig up dead things, they study the past. They're men and women of the dust, of the earth, of materialism. They don't create life, they study death and extinction. And that's important because when John Hammond shows up, he's offering them something else entirely. He's offering them a garden, paradise, life itself. But watch what happens to them by the end of the film. They go from childless career obsessives to adoptive parents who have learned that the old man in white was wrong, and the guy in black was right all along. Character arc complete, generational programming successful. Now let's talk about John Hammond, because this is where it gets interesting. Richard Attenborough plays him with this grandfatherly warmth, right? White beard, white suit, white hair, the visual coding is blatant. He's literally dressed as the Western cultural image of God. He's the patriarch, he's the creator, he's the one who made this whole world exist. But watch his entrance scene carefully, and this is where you need to slow the footage down and really look at what Steve's doing. Hammond arrives at the dig site, interrupting Alan and Ellie's work. He just helps himself to their champagne. He's already eating and drinking what isn't his, even though technically he's paid for it. Sound familiar? It's the Garden of Eden, reframed. And this is brilliant, Hammond reaches out and shakes Grant's dusty fingertip. The creation of Adam. Steve literally references Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel painting. God reaching out to Adam, man of dust, breathing the breath of life into him. Hammond is bringing Grant to the island, to paradise, to see living dinosaurs, life from death, resurrection imagery everywhere. But here's the subversion. Hammond isn't the true creator. He's the imposter. He's the demiurge, to use Gnostic language, the false god who thinks he's in control but actually isn't. He's made something he can't control, doesn't understand, and ultimately fails to maintain. By the end of the film, he's a broken old man, sitting in the ruined visitor center, admitting he's lost control. That's the message. God was never really in control. He's just a deluded old man playing with forces he doesn't understand, and the next generation needs to realize that and move beyond him. Which brings us to Ian Malcolm. Jeff Goldblum in black leather, all charisma and charm, the rock star of science, Steve's words, not mine. And who is Malcolm in this narrative framework? He's Lucifer, he's Satan, he's the adversary, and that's literally what Satan means in Hebrew, adversary or accuser. And who is Malcolm adversarial toward throughout the entire film? John Hammond, God, the Patriarch. Malcolm is dressed in black, visual opposite to Hammond's white. He's charismatic, charming, attractive. He's shown as right about everything from the beginning. He asks the uncomfortable questions. He points out the flaws in Hammond's creation. He's the one bringing knowledge, bringing enlightenment, bringing gnosis. Life finds a way, that's Malcolm's gospel, and by the end of the film everyone believes it, even Hammond, and especially the audience. It becomes the thesis statement of the entire franchise. Life, nature, chaos, evolution is the real creative force, not God, not order, not design. And let's not pretend that bare-chested scene after he's injured isn't deliberate. This is 1993. Divorced boomer mothers are in the cinema with their millennial sons. Malcolm becomes eye candy, but more than that, he becomes vulnerable, human, relatable. He's not an abstract theological concept. He's Jeff Goldblum with his shirt off, bleeding and suffering for his truth-telling. My hero. Steve knew exactly what he was doing there, mate. Make Lucifer attractive, make him sympathetic, even make him a little sexy, but most importantly, make him right. So now you've got your Genesis framework established. Hammond is God, Malcolm is the serpent, and the island is the Garden of Eden. Which makes Alan and Ellie Adam and Eve. And just like the biblical narrative, they're confronted with a choice between two trees: Hammond's tree of life, the dinosaurs, resurrection, his creation, and Malcolm's tree of knowledge of good and evil, chaos theory, the understanding that Hammond's creation is flawed and doomed. The dinner scene is where this crystallizes. Hammond is enthusiastic, defending his creation. Malcolm is systematically dismantling it, and Alan and Ellie sit there, listening, learning, choosing which tree to eat from. And Malcolm's final accusation in that scene: I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. And his final, damning statement: what you call discovery, I call it the grape of the natural world. Mate, he's not just talking about genetic engineering. He's talking about God, about creation itself. The Gnostic framework views the material world as a prison, created by a false god. Malcolm is literally accusing Hammond, God, of graping nature, of violating the natural order. And the audience learns, with Alan and Ellie, to agree with him. Now let's talk about Tim and Lex Murphy, because their inclusion isn't just about having kids in danger for dramatic tension. Their background is crucial. They have divorced parents, their father is absent, their mother is, somewhere else, apparently unable or unwilling to take them on this trip, so their grandfather John Hammond has them visit the island. Come on, mate, divorced, absent parents. That's the Gen X and Millennial experience in a nutshell. The boomer generation broke apart the nuclear family at unprecedented rates. These kids watching this film in 1993, they get it, they relate. Lex and Tim's situation is their situation. And what happens to these children? They're essentially orphaned on the island when the power fails. Their grandfather can't protect them, God has failed them. The only Christian in the film, the lawyer Gennaro, literally abandons them to save himself. We'll get to him in a minute. So who saves them? Who becomes their father figure? Alan Grant, the man of dust, the paleontologist, the Darwinian naturalist, the man who learns from Malcolm that life finds a way. Watch the progression of Alan's character. He starts the film hatting kids, literally threatening one with a velociraptor claw. But by the end, he's holding both children as they sleep on the helicopter, having adopted them emotionally and spiritually. And what has he taught them? That Malcolm was right, that Hammond was wrong, that Grandpa, God, lost control, that life finds a way not through divine order but through chaos and evolution. The millennial children's journey in this film is a journey away from God and toward a Malcolm-style understanding of existence. Alan is their guide, their new father, replacing the absent biological father and the failed grandfather. That's the programming, mate. Your earthly father left you. Your heavenly father, God, can't control his own creation and will ultimately fail you, but trust in the chaos, trust in Malcolm's gospel. Life finds a way. Crowley called it do what thou wilt, and Disney, follow your heart. Now we need to talk about Donald Gennaro, the somewhat forgettable lawyer, because the programming continues here to new depths. Gennaro is the only explicitly Christian character in the entire film. How do we know? He's eaten off a toilet while praying the rosary, he's Catholic, and Steve makes sure you know it. But before he dies, what has Gennaro been characterized as? Greedy, he's worried about investors and money. Cowardly, he abandons Tim and Lex in the car when the T-Rex shows up, running to hide in the toilet. And there's that throwaway line earlier about autoerotica, a pretty gross malapropism suggesting he's sexually perverted. So the Christian in the film is greedy, cowardly, possibly sexually deviant, and useless in a crisis. And he dies humiliated, literally on a toilet with his pants down while praying. That's not subtle, mate. That's contempt. That's programming an entire generation to view Christianity, and particularly Catholicism with its traditional emphasis on authority and hierarchy, as not just wrong but pathetic. The Christian can't save the children. The Christian runs away. The Christian dies badly while praying to a God who doesn't help him. Message received, Steve. We need to address Ellie Sattler, because she's the vehicle for early 90s feminist messaging, and it's not incidental to the theological subversion. Ellie is unmarried but sexually active with Grant, normalized boomer sexually deviant behavior. She's a strong, empowered woman who doesn't need marriage or children or traditional feminine roles. She's a scientist, she's capable, she's independent. And Steve makes sure to give her the ideological wins. When the Luciferian Malcolm states, God creates dinosaurs, God destroys dinosaurs, God creates man, man destroys God, man creates dinosaurs, Ellie puns his theology chronology to its final conclusion. Dinosaurs eat man, woman inherits the earth. It's a clever bit of wordplay, but the message is clear. The patriarchy is over, masculine authority is finished, and feminine chaos nature will inherit the future. The divine feminine. Later, when Hammond tries to stop her from going to restore the power, a dangerous task, he musters the courage to at least express the idea of traditional patriarchal protectiveness, his first attempt at courage in the film. Ellie's response. She dismisses him entirely with the threat of a feminist lecture about sexism in survival situations, and enters the fray. And the film validates her. She succeeds. She literally restores power to the park. The woman saves everyone while the men have failed. Nedry Arnold Muldoon all dead. Hammond humiliated on his way to extinction. But here's the thing, mate. This isn't just about gender politics. In the Gnostic framework, the feminine divine, Sophia, wisdom, is trapped in the material world created by the masculine demiurge. Ellie overcoming Hammond's patriarchal authority to restore power is symbolically the feminine gnosis overcoming the masculine false god. And at the dinner table, when Hammond is waxing poetic about his creation and his vision, who shuts him down? Ellie, the empowered woman, tells God he's wrong, he's dangerous, he's the problem. Programming complete. The pop culture atheists thought they were helping to progress society towards a utopian religionless future, but all they did was revive the ancient mysteries and embrace pagan sensuality. Hollywood was telling us where they were taking us all along. Now let's pull back and talk about the context this film exists in, because there's a reason Steve chose Dinosaurs in 1993. By the early 90s, there was a growing academic consensus that dinosaurs had evolved into birds. This needed to be popularized, normalized, accepted by the masses. What better vehicle than a blockbuster film that every millennial child would see? Jurassic Park doesn't just show dinosaurs as extinct monsters, it shows them as active, dynamic, proto-avian creatures. The velociraptors move like birds. They're shown as intelligent, pack-hunting, problem-solving. The connection is being made visually and narratively. This is Freemasonic naturalism being spoon-fed to the masses through popular culture. Evolution isn't just a theory anymore, it's CGI reality on a cinema screen. Kids leave the theater believing they've seen real dinosaurs, and the evolutionary framework is embedded in their worldview before they even understand what's happened. And that framework is fundamentally materialistic, or more accurately, Gnostic and pagan. It rejects divine creation in favor of naturalistic processes. It rejects biblical authority in favor of scientific authority. It positions Christianity as the enemy of knowledge and progress. Malcolm says it explicitly, "Don't you see the danger inherent in what you're doing here? Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid who's found his dad's gun." Never mind that children were taught to use firearms throughout history, and they only began to misuse that power was when they embraced atheism and went systematically through Columbine High looking for the Christians. That's for another video. In the analogy, Hammond, God, is the child with dangerous toys he doesn't understand. Malcolm, Lucifer, is the enlightened one bringing real knowledge. It all comes together in the ending. Hammond sits alone in the helicopter, his cane, symbol of patriarchal authority, lies unused. The amber with mosquito blood, his miracle of recreation, is in his hands, but it means nothing now. Malcolm's words echo, life finds a way, not Hammond's way, not God's way, life's way, chaos, evolution, nature. The next generation flies toward a future without him. Alan, Ellie, and the children, by contrast, have survived. They've grown. They've learned the right gnosis, and in doing so, they've rejected Hammond's vision and embraced Malcolm's truth. And the film ends with them looking out the window at birds flying alongside the helicopter. Not dinosaurs, birds, the evolved form, the natural progression, life finding a way. That's the arc, mate. That's the message. That's the programming. Look, I know this is heavy. I know some of you are thinking, it's just a dinosaur movie, calm down. But come on, mate. Nothing at this level of cultural production is just anything. We pay good money to go to the cinema to be affected, emotionally, psychologically, physiologically, and intellectually. And Steve Spielberg is one of the most sophisticated filmmakers in history. Every frame is intentional. Every character serves a purpose. Every line of dialogue carries weight. And what he did with Jurassic Park was create a Gnostic retelling of Genesis, aimed at millennial children, designed to fundamentally alter how they understand God, authority, creation, and their place in existence. The biblical God becomes Hammond, a deluded old man who lost control and failed. Satan becomes Malcolm, the attractive truth-teller who was right all along. The faithful become Gennaro, pathetic cowards who die badly. The cultural revolutionaries become Ellie, strong women rejecting patriarchal authority. The next generation becomes Tim and Lex, orphaned by broken families, adopted by Darwinian naturalists, taught that life finds a way through chaos, not order. And an entire generation of kids absorbed this without even knowing it happened. That's sophisticated propaganda, mate. That's cultural programming at the highest level. And it worked. Look around at the millennial generation now, overwhelmingly pagan, hostile to Christianity, tattooed up to the eyeballs for attention, childless but mum and dad to precious fur Barbies, embracing chaos over order, evolution over creation, Malcolm's gospel over anything remotely biblical. Life finds a way became the new in the beginning God created, and Steve knew exactly what he was doing. So yeah, enjoy your dinosaur movie, but don't pretend you weren't being programmed while you watched it. This was the Frank Fox being frank about how popular culture is a vehicle for the dissemination of pagan religion to a post-Christian Western society with New Age sensibilities. If you enjoy the content I am producing, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help me continue exposing the worldview behind our most praised artistic achievements. Thanks, and have a great day.